is another interesting edition of the Economy and Politics show where we discuss developments in the economy as it affects the populace. We're still reflecting on Nigeria's 22 years attainment of uninterrupted democratic governance, which of course many have described as a miracle. Calculated, that's 2 decades plus 2 years. But today we'll be looking at how we can sustain this democracy, making it work for all Nigerians. So the focus is towards a sustainable democracy in Nigeria. With me to have this conversation is an elder statesman, a political economist, and the founder of the Center for Values and Leadership in Nigeria, Professor Pat Utomi. Nice to have you once again on the program, Professor Pat.
It's a pleasure.
It's a pleasure. And let's begin with the fact that Professor James Robinson, co-author of the book, Why Nations Fail, speaking about Nigeria and how it can strengthen its democracy, said it needs to have institutions, inclusive institutions that will guarantee an enduring democracy. How would you assess that, looking at Nigeria in the last 22 years, and what needs to be done to strengthen our institutions for a viable democracy?
Okay, I'd like to break this down into 2 parts. One, a general response to the idea of institutions and performance, and second, democratic institutions and the Nigerian experience. At the level of speaking at institutions and how institutions facilitate performance, I think it's important to note that the book by James Robinson and Darren Acemoglu, which is a seminal work in the area of why nations underperform. The book, of course, is titled Why Nations Fail. Interestingly, has a similar title to the one that Why Nations Are Poor. And both have institutions as their central framework. And mine came out in 2006, theirs came out in 2016, 10 years after. But the greater insight, which has been drawn from by both Robinson and Acemoglu and many others who have written in this area, including myself, have come from Douglas North. Douglas North, who won a Nobel Prize in economics, wrote essentially in the area of institutional economics. His 1990 book, Institutions, Institutional Change and Economic Performance, is a groundbreaking thinking around the role that institutions play in economic development and economic performance in general. I had a good fortune of meeting Douglas North at Stanford in March of 1996. He was on sabbatical leave at the Hoover Institution when I was invited to give a talk there. And, fascinating thinking. But the bottom line about his work, which influenced my own 1998 book, Managing Uncertainty, Computational Strategy in Emerging Economies, is essentially that institutions evolve. They're not just something you decree. You decree into an existence an organ. It will be there. Institutions evolve. We do things, then they, adapt to change and then come up. When you decree an institution, say a central bank is an institution by decree number, this is, for example, in Nigeria, Banking Ordinance of 1959, establishing Central Bank of Nigeria. Now, if the people don't take ownership and see it for what it is, institutions will not exactly function to deal with the problems as they should be dealt with. Because most institutions in Nigeria have been framed, put in place from just lifted from somewhere, what we tend to find is that institutions are even more disruptive of the environment sometimes, because the mindset of power, authority, which institutions also give out in Nigeria, is that of a bully. Look, I'm the one in charge. Whatever I say, if I say job, you say how high. It is not something that came out in the way Douglas North thinks of it as, the competition of people who have interests in an area, and then an unseen hand begins to move people towards a set of boundaries, and then people conform. That's why the old institutional school, people like Ronald Coase and co, argue that institutions are settled habits of the community. Now, what has happened, unfortunately for us, is that because our institutions are often not settled habits of community, we find that institutions become so disruptive in the bully mindset that they are problematic for development, unfortunately for us. If you go specifically to the arena of democratic institutions, one of the most important institutions for democracy is the political party. In Nigeria, political parties are clearly not institutions of progress. Political parties are private enterprises set up by a group of people for the purpose of state capture.
That's the Nigerian concept.
To capture the Nigerian state, and then to reduce governmental processes to something that is used to extract material benefits and power benefits to individuals who own the political party. So because of that, political parties have been central to the failure of the Nigerian state. We talk about Nigeria as either failing or failed or whatever your inclination is. Central to that is the nature of political parties and how, ironically, incidentally, what is called the APC began as parties. Believe newspapers annual lecture of, I don't know, I remember year 20, whatever, in Abuja, on all the leaders, or almost all the leaders of what became the APC were in that hall. Bola Tinubu, I think Buhari, Akonde, everybody. And the central thesis of my lecture went back to 1911 and the book Political Parties by Roberto Michels. And the concept and ideas of the iron law of oligarchy.
Yes,
he who says organization says oligarchy.
Yeah.
And I built up the conversation, to the point that Dr. Paul Unongo, who was in the hall, he got so excited, he ran to me and said, look, I wish I can lock the doors of this place. None of these people should live here until you can found a party that will dislodge this useless PDP. Well, sadly, because the institution of the political party did not evolve, because it became the private enterprise of those people, the APC became dysfunctional and has probably done more damage or as much damage as the PDP to Nigeria's prospects as a country. So Robinson is absolutely correct in the place of institutions. But how do we build those institutions? It comes from my quarreling with PDP and quarreling with APC until people realize that, look, we might corner a party and use it to put idiots in place as leaders so that we can get what we want. But ultimately, everybody suffers. So enough people like me quarreling about it, we then come to a conclusion, look, our country cannot continue like this.
Yeah.
And then true political parties will then emerge. And the country can then make progress because those institutional arrangements facilitate boundaries that keep morons out of political parties. And the people who can make a difference move into positions of public leadership.
All right, Prof. So there have been growing concerns of our constitution, which 1999 operating, handed down to us by the military, but the citizens want to be involved. And we've seen the constitutional review process currently by the National Assembly. But I just want to ask you, as an elder statesman and of course political economist, what are the top 3, or if you want to make it 5 areas, you would like to see amendments to this constitution to work for the citizens?
Well, I think that looking at them as amendments is also a problematic matter. No, the first criticism is that the document itself is a lie. That it says that we the people, whereas the people said nothing at all. So a starting point is a provision for a referendum that makes it the people's document. It's important that that be part of the process of whatever comes out of the engagement of the Nigerian peoples in one form or the other. No doubt there have been quite a number of engagements, last of which was the Jonathan Constitutional Conference, that you can take the output and the outcomes of those conferences, put it to some public conversation. There are drafts floating around right now. There's a draft that has been put together by a group, I think, with Utomi and others, Utomi and co. There's a draft about to come out from the NCF that I'm involved with.
Yes.
There's another. So you get all these drafts and put them for Nigerian people to have conversations. And then after they've had the conversations, pool what is being put together. It will not fly saying the Senate has gone around National Assembly, because there's a legitimacy problem with those institutions. Most people think that the people in National Assembly were not elected by the Nigerian people. The institution is basically struggling legitimacy. There's a trust deficit. So when you take what the peoples have done, put it together with what the National Assembly as a group of Nigerian peoples have put together, let's get some wise people to synthesize all of this. And when they are done, they should be put to Nigerian people for a referendum. But among the key things that people are looking to see in this is, one, the reworking of the fiscal transfer system between the national or federal government and subnationals. This has often been the famous restructuring thing. Restructuring because people focus too much on revenues and sharing revenues rather than on wealth creation through production. And I've been able to show in some of my recent conversations that revenues do not make anybody wealthy in a sustainable way. What makes wealthy is production. And so I think having a conversation around restructuring that takes this into account will reduce some of the tension that is generating unduly, unnecessarily. There's also the fact that the situation for many people is such that we need to get the principle of subsidiarity firmly embedded in our constitution, decentralization of authority, stuff like policing, being more local, and so on and so forth. I think that people want to see a constitution where people can have the right to secede, actually. Not because they want to secede, but because it pressures politicians to offer leadership that doesn't make people want to do that. The American Constitution has it. And the reason that it has worked so well, which is why people like Neil Ferguson, the British historian, refer to it as probably one of the greatest efforts at institution building in human history, is that they anticipated these things, even though there were imperfections in the way American Constitution and the American people were. But their constitution making process anticipated those things and made room for them. And this is very, very important.
Very, very important. The last part you stopped. Okay.
So we've got that. I think that these are the some of the top three or so. Yeah, okay.
Yes. I know you also added the electoral reforms, which is very key. I know that you gave a lot of notes around that. Yeah.
A very critical part of it, because you're not going to get legitimacy built up in the political arena if you don't have electoral reforms.
And we've had a long journey in electoral reforms. I can remember the era of late President Yaradua, where the Justice Wise Commission was set up to look at a good electoral reforms. If only that was leveraged and strengthened, I think we have had more.
What has happened every time that we try to have electoral reforms is that the politicians sabotage it because they know that they can't win elections. So after everything has been done, I mean, Yaradua was going to sign one. Yeah. Then they went to him and said, you can't do that. You can't. So if that kind of law was in place, you wouldn't be here. You know, so the real problem is the political class. They don't believe in democracy. And that needs to be overcome if we're going to make progress.
I believe we have to come to that point, because one part I like about that electoral reforms is the part that people can become independent candidates. So you don't have to go through all those hackles sometimes of some political party structure. But that's something that we'll still look at and hope to have effective reforms in the political space. But you attended the National Breakfast Prayer Meeting chaired by former head of state General Yakubu Gowon, which also had the Vice President, Professor Yemi Osibanjo, in attendance. And his message, the Vice President said, despite the dark clouds, Nigeria will pull through the challenges. And we are really going through very challenging times. Renewed agitations from the southeast to north and other parts of the country, economic challenges, issues around the freedom of expression in this period has become a crossroads situation for Nigeria. What will be your message to Nigerians and the leaders as we reflect on this democratic journey?
Well, I think that it is important to be a bearer of hope. Without hope, humanity is crushed. Besides that fundamental orientation, I also do have been a lot of, if you will, examples from history that show that countries can go through what Nigeria is going through and then come through. I often talk about Brazil and its troubles and how it has managed under good leadership between Inácio Lula da Silva and, of course, his predecessor, Enrique Fernando Cardoso. Yeah. We have seen things improve in Brazil from a position of near hopelessness at a point in time. We have the Asian examples, the reforms in South Korea that took money bags out of politics and enabled the vision of Park and others to then be elevated to another level, and so on and so forth. So Nigeria can rise again. One of my favorite songs, in fact, my signature tune, personal signature tune for more than 15 years now, it's a song, Nigeria will rise up again. God will heal our land, restore us anew, Nigeria will rise up again. I believe in it. I think in it. I went to that meeting primarily because General Gowon had asked that I speak to the Nigerian experience in the last 60-something years, why we are where we are, how we can get out of it. Unfortunately, the media, which came with and left with the vice president, did not focus on the central part of the event, which was my speech. They just focused on the man kneeling down to pray and stuff like that. And then to show you how polarized this country is, some people even said to me, we saw you hanging around with people you should not be seen in their company. I didn't realize it was that bad. It was the fact that I was seen standing by the vice president upset many people. That's not the way our country should go. That was a prayer meeting for all of us to come together and pray for our country. Initiative was led by General Gowon, who's done it for years. Many countries have a national prayer breakfast, and this is a good one. I think that I'm very, very optimistic about Nigeria's future. We have a bright generation of young people. If we invest appropriately in them, our country will take off and regain its lost glory. I do believe in that.
What a good way to sign off this, that amidst our challenges, there's great hope that Nigeria will rise again and be a great country. But of course, like you rightly said, we need to have a constitution that guarantees effective electoral reforms, fiscal transfer system from the national to sub-national governments, entrench the principle of subsidiary, which includes decentralization, and also having effective institutions, particularly political parties, that are functional for driving development and not private enterprises that want to capture states, the power for personal interest, and of course investing in human capital, developing the skills and potentials of our young people. I want to really thank you, Professor Pat Utomi, for taking out time had to have a very, very busy schedule to feature today. But of course, no better person to have this conversation with. You've traversed decades looking at Nigeria's political economy and how it can be sustained. Thank you very much, Prof, once again for the time, and we look forward to having you subsequently. Thank you very much once again.
It's a pleasure.
And that'll be all for this edition of the Economy and Politics Show. You can join the conversation as we reflect on Nigeria's journey, 22 years as a democratic nation. Send your views and comments to otobasi.abasekong@proshareng.com. Tell us how you feel about a democratic journey and what must be done to improve it. And also, if there's anything that you learned today or anything you feel you want to share concerning this conversation today around towards the sustainable democracy in Nigeria, feel free to express your views, sending your mails to that email that has been displayed again to you, otobasi.abasekong@proshareng.com. Also follow the social media platforms that's playing on your screen to engage us on developments in the political economic space. Log on to our website, www.proshareng.com, and when you go to the right hand of the bar, you have politics, and also you have Nigeria economy to see all that's happened as we continue to see developments in the Nigerian political economic space. Don't forget this period that you need to stay safe. Thank you for being part of this program. Until we come your way again once again, have a nice day.